Hey everyone, you can do your own research to find out a little bit about Kierkegaard and the time that he's writing and all of that jazz. But I want to just give you like a little bit of background that might help you understand the reading. This chunk of reading is just the first 10 pages of a much larger book, Fear and Trembling. Fear and Trembling is I would guess it's about a 100-page book. But actually some of the more beautiful writing is in these first 10 pages. In the preface, what we get is Kierkegaard talking a lot about, or the author talking about a lot about philosophers of that day and how they all go beyond the process of doubting. And what's helpful to understand is that he's actually being sarcastic. He's sort of making a joke that what the author is sort of saying is Descartes is this famous philosopher who wound up doubting everything he knew to see if he could find something that was certain. And so he famously, you might know that I think, therefore I am. That's Descartes. But what's sort of interesting about Descartes is he finds I think, therefore I am after a long process of doubting all his beliefs. And so here the author is sort of making fun of modern day philosophers that act like, well, doubt is no big deal. We don't have to worry about it. And he's drawing an analogy there to people who think about religion and think like, well, we don't even need to really think about faith that much. Faith's sort of an easy thing. And he basically is making a long joke in the preface about sort of encouraging us to maybe pause and think about the fact that actually perhaps faith is a very complicated and interesting thing to think about and shouldn't be dismissed quite so quickly. So in the prelude, there's some discussion of a young person being exposed to the story of Abraham. So I want to give you a little bit of background on the story of Abraham. So Abraham's considered the father of faith for both Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. One of the interesting divides between Islam on one hand and Judaism and Christianity on the other hand is that God comes to Abraham and promises him a son that will be the father of nations. And the father of nations meaning your children will become the chosen people. And Abraham and his wife Sarah are very old at the time, and it seems highly unlikely that they will have a child at this point. And at one point, Sarah basically gives Abraham permission to sleep with their servant, and the servant is Ishmael. And then later, Abraham and Sarah have Isaac, and Ishmael and his mother are cast out. And so there's this sort of debate about who is this chosen child who's supposed to be the father of nations. So Islam traces its roots to Ishmael, and Judaism and then Christianity trace their roots to Isaac. So here we have Abraham telling the story as if this child is Isaac. But what happens biblically and in the Quran and the I'm forgetting the term for the Old Testament of the Bible used in Judaism, I apologize, the Torah, is that Abraham is visited again by God, and God commands Abraham to go to Mount Moriah and sacrifice his son for God. And so it sort of helps to just understand what that story itself is as you get into this. And so with that, you can sort of pick this up. But the idea is to not focus on God's role in this conversation, but the role of the person who God visits, right? So what is the experience of Abraham, and what does that tell us about faith and rationality and all of those things? So be looking for all that stuff as you read. One other thing that I want to help you with, because it can be really confusing, is we've got these Roman numerals as part of the prelude, okay? And it's not obviously clear what those are. But if you read carefully, you'll probably figure this out. But what these are 4 alternate endings to the story of Abraham going to Mount Moriah to sacrifice Isaac. So they are not what's supposed to have happened. They're what would be a slight variation on what did happen, that Kierkegaard's going to say, like, if any of these 4 things happen, then the story is totally different. And so one thing to look for as you read is, like, what would change if, what's sort of the big thing that makes each of these 4 things different. So hopefully that'll help you a little bit. I know you guys are perfectly capable of doing this research on your own, but this will make it so that you could just focus your research on Kierkegaard himself, and then also just working through the reading. It's only about 10 pages, so we look forward to our conversation on Thursday.